Welcome to episode 24 of Project 250, a weekly chronicle of the people, places, and events of the American Revolution in the order they occurred. So, without further ado, here's what was happening 250 years ago this week, June 15th to 21st, 1775. Last week, colonial forces continued to gather at Boston as Colonel Varnum's Rhode Island Regiment arrived at Roxbury, Massachusetts. On the same day, the governor of Virginia, Lord Dunmore, fled from the governor's palace to the HMS Foy, marking the end of royal governance in Virginia. On May 9th, the Continental Congress issued regulations for establishing a civil government in Massachusetts and directed Rhode Island to send flour to the army in Massachusetts. Also, John Adams proposed that Congress adopt the colonial forces at Boston as a continental army and recommended George Washington for the position of commanding general. Meanwhile, in France, King Louis XVI was crowned. On June 11th, Colonel Benjamin Foster, with a band of 30 militia, set out to capture the loyalist Ichabod Jones and two other individuals. But what began as an abduction escalated into an hours-long firefight that lasted until dawn. This so-called Battle of Machias is often regarded as the first naval engagement of the American Revolution. The following day, June 12th, General Thomas Gage declared Massachusetts to be in a state of rebellion, imposed martial law in the colony, and stated that anyone assisting the American colonists would be considered a rebel and a traitor. That same day, Generals Howe, Burgoyne, and Clinton finalized their plans to end the rebel siege of Boston. Congress also voted to observe July 20th as a day of public humiliation, fasting, and prayer. On May 13th, the Massachusetts Provincial Congress received reports that the British were planning to attack Dorchester Heights and the Charlestown Peninsula. As the week ended, the Continental Army was officially formed, and a 5-member committee was established to draft rules and regulations for the Army. In addition to military matters, Congress continued to grapple with the problem of raising funds. As we begin, there is a lot to cover this week, so let's dive right in. We begin with a couple of crucial developments, starting with the appointment of George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army on June 15th. Meanwhile, an even bigger story was unfolding in Massachusetts as the Massachusetts Committee of Safety, having learned of British plans to attack Dorchester and Charlestown, began implementing a set of countermoves against the British threat. General Artemas Ward, commander of the militia forces besieging Boston, word of Washington's appointment having not yet reached Massachusetts, ordered General Israel Putnam to start constructing fortifications, specifically a redoubt on Bunker Hill along with smaller fortifications across the Charlestown Peninsula. The following day, June 16th, around 1,200 colonial militia, under the command of Colonel William Prescott, were sent to occupy Breed's Hill on the Charlestown Peninsula. After some debate, it was decided that Breed's Hill, being closer to Boston and more defensible than Bunker Hill, was the better position. Despite that fact, the coming battle would forever be known as the Battle of Bunker Hill. Prescott's force included troops from several Massachusetts units. In addition to Prescott's own regiment, they included those of Colonel James Fry, Colonel Ebenezer Bridge, and a small party from General Putnam's Connecticut Regiment, under the direction of Captain Thomas Knowlton and Captain Samuel Gridley's Artillery Company. The following day, June 17th, General Howe and the rest of the British High Command set their plans in motion. On the right, General Howe would lead the main assault against the American left flank, while Brigadier General Robert Piggott commanded the assault on the redoubt. Major John Pitcairn would lead the flank or reserve force. By 3 p.m., the last of the troops had crossed the river, and the British were ready to proceed. Right away, they ran into trouble. Just south of Charlestown, General Pigot's men began taking sniper fire from the town. At Howe's request, Admiral Graves ordered a carcass, a metal basket filled with gunpowder, saltpeter, and tallow, to be launched into the town and dispatched a landing party to set Charlestown on fire, an act that further enraged the Americans who regarded it as further proof of British barbarity. Once the attack began, the colonists held their fire until the regulars were within 50 paces, then opened fire, stacked 3 deep and firing in turns, one soldier firing while his comrades reloaded. The Colonials maintained a constant barrage that inflicted staggering casualties on the regulars, who soon withdrew in the face of heavy losses. The regulars reformed and tried again, but the second attack was no more successful than the first. After about 30 minutes of pointless sacrifice, Pigot ordered a retreat. Behind the American lines, there was a great deal of chaos and confusion. General Putnam struggled to send troops from Bunker Hill to support the frontline regiments, but many of the men refused to comply. Even more troubling, the troops at the front were running low on powder and ammunition, not to mention hemorrhaging deserters so fast that by the time the third attack came, there were only 700 to 800 defenders left on Breed's Hill, with just 150 in the redoubt itself. Meanwhile, Howe sent word to General Clinton in Boston requesting reinforcements. Clinton promptly dispatched around 400 men and even came along to help rally the troops. The soldiers would need the moral support as the third assault would be made over the bodies of their fallen comrades. By this time, Howe had wised up and adjusted his strategy. He ordered his men to remove their heavy packs and discard any unnecessary equipment. The British also changed tactics, abandoning the more conventional line formations for less vulnerable columns. But what ultimately proved most decisive was when the defenders ran out of ammunition. The British, being equipped with bayonets, now had the advantage. The militia, being unable to withstand a bayonet charge, had no choice but to flee. The British finally captured the redoubt, but the final volleys from the Colonials took the life of Major John Pitcairn, whose actions at Lexington 2 months earlier had done so much to spark the conflict. Putnam tried to rally the troops on Bunker Hill, but the momentum of retreat was too strong to reverse. As a result, 5 artillery pieces and some entrenching tools were left behind. It was during this retreat that the colonists suffered their most significant casualties, including Joseph Warren. By 5 p.m., the colonists had retreated to Cambridge, leaving the British firmly in control of the Charlestown Peninsula. General Burgoyne had achieved his elbow room, but at a terrible cost. The British suffered 1,054 casualties, including 226 dead and 828 wounded, 100 of whom were officers. These would prove to be the highest casualties suffered by the British in any single encounter during the entire war. General Clinton noted in his diary that a few more such victories would have shortly put an end to British dominion in America. But neither did the Colonials emerge unscathed. American losses totaled approximately 450, with 140 killed, including Joseph Warren, president of the Massachusetts Provincial Congress. Warren's death and the loss of his leadership would prove a severe blow to the Patriot cause. Major Andrew McClary was the highest-ranking colonial officer killed in the battle, as well as the last, being struck by cannon fire on Charlestown Neck. About 30 Americans were captured, 20 of whom died while still in custody. The battle, while a victory for the British, had demonstrated that militia could stand up to regular army troops. It also led to a change in British tactics and an avoidance of further frontal assaults. Bunker Hill also demonstrated, to the British, that subduing the rebellion would be much more difficult than they first envisioned, and helped convince them of the need to engage foreign troops. The following day, at Narragansett Bay, the American sloop, Cadena, captured the Royal Navy tender, Diana, not to be confused with the British sloop of the same name. In Philadelphia, George Washington wrote to his wife, Martha, informing her of his appointment as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and expressing his misgivings regarding his abilities to carry out his duties.
I assure you, in the most solemn manner, that so far from seeking this appointment, I have used every endeavor in my power to avoid it, not only from my unwillingness to part with you and the family, but from a consciousness of its being a trust too great for my capacity.
Also on May 18th, Abigail Adams wrote to her husband, John, of the encounter at Bunker Hill, saying,
My bursting heart must find vent at my pen. I have just heard that our dear friend Dr. Warren is no more, but fell gloriously fighting for his country, saying better to die honorably in the field than ignominiously hang upon the gallows. Great is our loss. He has distinguished himself in every engagement by his courage and fortitude, by animating the soldiers and leading them on by his own example.
2 days later, Abigail wrote again to John, this time on a more hopeful note, assuring him that
the spirit of the people are very good. The loss of Charlestown affects them no more than a drop in the bucket.
On June 19th, the same day that Congress formally created the post of commanding general, George Washington informed his stepson, Jackie Parke Custis, of his appointment and requested that Jackie and his wife, Eleanor, relocate to Mount Vernon to take care of Martha. The following day, after receiving his orders, Washington made plans to leave Philadelphia. Before heading to Boston, he sent a farewell message to the officers of 5 Virginia militia units he had previously commanded. On that same day, a smallpox hospital was established in Cambridge, Massachusetts, marking the first of several such institutions to be created. Last this week, but certainly not least, Thomas Jefferson arrived at the Continental Congress, replacing his cousin, Peyton Randolph, who departed on May 24th to return to Williamsburg. And that's the way it was 250 years ago this week. If you enjoyed this video, please tell a friend. And if you like what you see on this channel, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter, or X, as well as on Substack. Thank you for watching.